In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity. And welcome back to another week on the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manasseh, here as we equip you with practical tools to live your faith in our modern world of today. And many of you have your private devotions. And this week, our good friend of mine, Father Peter Williams, Vicar General for the Diocese of Parramatta, here to speak about private devotions and the liturgy. Welcome back to the show, Father.
Thank you very much, George. Pleasure to be here.
It's always great to have a good liturgical conversation, and I think today we'll be venturing a little bit out of the liturgy into the private sphere.
Yeah.
Outside the formal prayer of the church.
Yes, but it's still a recognised and valuable treasury of our heritage, of our tradition. And the beginning point for this is a document which was promulgated during the time of Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, in December of 2001. And the document has the title, The Directory on Popular Piety in the Liturgy. And it's the principles and the guidelines. This directory is actually not as well known as what it should be, I think. It's like John Paul's pontificate, as we know, is a very long one of the longest in the history of the Church. And a lot of material, a lot of documents were promulgated during his pontificate. Marvellous documents, like he wrote one on the importance of Sunday, Dies Domini, but very few people know about it, about the importance of keeping Sunday as not only a day, obviously, to attend Mass, but as a day for families. So, I mean, this document that I'm referring to, the Directory on Popular Piety in the Liturgy, is one such document. Now, it's awfully long, and I didn't print it out, so I'm using modern technology to sort of look into it. But basically what it's saying, in essence, is that any personal, any private or even public devotion, because there are private devotions, but there are also public devotions that can serve as a private devotion. Now, let me give you one example. People pray the Rosary. You can pray the Rosary privately. I prayed the Rosary this morning, as I do every morning, because I'm up very early and it's part of my prayer regime every day. But we could go to a church where there was a public recitation of the Rosary. And you've probably been to churches that sometimes before Mass or you hear the Rosary. You hear people are in the church praying the Rosary together, collectively.
Okay.
But it can serve as a public devotion or it can serve as a private devotion. Stations of the Cross are similar. We could go to the church individually during Lent.
Yep.
We could have a book in front of us and we could go around and do the Stations of the Cross by ourselves. Or we could turn up on Friday night during Lent, which is a tradition in many parishes, where there's a public devotion of the Stations of the Cross. Similarly, what has become very popular for a number of people in recent years is the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. You can do that by yourself, or you can do that with a group of people. So many of the so-called private devotions actually can also have a public face. But the one thing that this directory from St. John Paul II says is that at the end of the day, any of the devotions that we use are meant to lead us into the official liturgy of the Church. They're not separate streams, but one always should lead to the other, because, as the document says, the liturgy, the public liturgy of the Church in the celebration of the sacraments is, in fact, as it says in the paragraph, sacred liturgy described by Sacrosanctum Concilium as the summit of the Church's life can never be reduced to a mere aesthetic reality. So, in other words, what it's saying is that the public liturgy, that private devotion should help us, lead us into and from the public liturgy of the Church.
Wow.
So it enhances, if you like.
What you don't realise, and what I just realised now when you said that, is that public devotions can also be private and vice versa.
Yeah, of course they can.
Yeah.
Many of them can. So you, for instance, might decide that you want to privately engage in a novena of 9 days of prayer and petition, and you might decide to make a novena to Our Lady, and you might have some resources which you might use privately in your own house. But then a parish might arrange to have a novena. There are those famous from our brothers and sisters in the Philippines, is the 9 days, the novena before Christmas, what they call the Missa de Gallo, the Mass of the Cockcrow. In other words, it's normally held at some impossible hour in the morning,
4
like
a.m.
about
in the morning,
4 a.m. or 4:30 in the morning.
Followed by breakfast at 5 a.m.
Yes. Now, I have to confess, I've never been to one, but it draws great crowds. And there are several parishes around the Diocese of Parramatta where they have this Mass, the Rooster Mass, in the 9 days that lead up to Christmas. So, again, what we have here, which I think is one of the most wonderful joys of Catholicism, that all over the world there have developed local customs and devotions. And I think the country that probably tops the bill for its own local customs and devotions is probably Spain.
It's always the Spanish.
Yeah, in Lent, and particularly in Holy Week, you've probably seen video reels of those extraordinary processions of Our Lady of Sorrows or Christ carrying his cross. These extraordinary, ornate, what look like floats in effect, carried on the shoulders of hundreds of men who are dressed with the pointy hats that make them look like members of the Ku Klux Klan.
You said it.
Well, they probably borrowed it from there, to be honest. They probably saw that and thought this is a good way to disguise ourselves, which is a great pity. Because what they're actually expressing, by the way, that whole vesture is because a friend of mine was in Europe and he saw this happening and he said, "Can you explain to me why are they dressed like? What is this meant to represent?" They're identifying themselves as penitents. It was the garb that the penitent put on to identify themselves that they were penitents, that they were sinners. And this was a way of publicly identifying themselves as sinners. And then they would bear the burden of carrying this big, heavy, floating procession.
Wow.
But they do it in such a spectacular way. In some of them are so ornate and heavy, I think, that you've got hundreds of people, you can see the reels
I've
around
seen them,
Holy Week.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And it's just amazing. And this is, and what they do, the villagers, what they try to do, of course, is they all try to outdo one another. So there's a bit of a sort of a competition where various towns and villages in Spain will see that they can do something that outdoes the village next door. So we've got this terribly rich tradition. Similarly in Italy, that, after particularly in the Middle Ages, with when Corpus Christi became promulgated as a feast, there were Corpus Christi processions, and local customs built up around making the Corpus Christi processions ornate and rich. And these are all local customs that all are helping people to enrich their own spiritual experience.
It's absolutely beautiful when you see the different cultures, especially throughout Europe, and the variations of local traditions. A very lovely one I was speaking to a German priest many years back who celebrated the traditional Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral, Parramatta, and I noticed his head beretta had a fourth cut, and I said, why is there four corners? He said, because that's the way the Germans do it. And things like in France, there are traditions, and especially within the East as well. There's so many variations of local culture and tradition. But I want to ask you this question. When we speak about private devotions, which can be private and then can be expressed publicly or listed publicly in a parish, do they go through an approval process of the church? Or over time, do they organically grow through the sensus fidelium of the lived experience of the faithful to become more public? And are some more private than others? Like, for example, some, those prayer devotions that you find in a narthex of a church, and you don't know where they're from.
True. Now, it's a good question. It's a very important question. Some of those, some of the material that we find scattered around churches actually doesn't have ecclesiastical approval.
We have a fair share of those.
And
everywhere,
and the church has a method whereby it tests I suppose we might say, the veracity, the truthfulness, or the value of when somebody comes forward with some form of devotion that they believe is worthy of cultivating. Now, I'm just looking here at this directory, and just in chapter 4 of the directory, which, by the way, your listeners and viewers can access easily online, there is a whole list of things that where the liturgical year and popular piety go together. So let me I won't go through them all because it would take far too long. But for instance, in Advent, the Advent Rosary, processions in Advent, the Blessed Virgin Mary in Advent, the Christmas Novena, the Crib, and then it goes on, in Lent, veneration of Christ crucified, reading of the Passions, Stations of the Cross, the Via Matris, Holy Week, Palm Sunday, and so on. Visit to the altar of repose, Good Friday processions, representations of the Passions of Christ, the memorial of Our Lady of Dolors. It goes on and on and on, where it shows where private devotions will intersect with what is happening in terms of the liturgical calendar. And that's, it just enriches everything. It just makes things richer. So, but back to your question. Yes, there are people who try to promote a particular devotion, and
if you don't spread the devotion, you'll be cursed after 7 days.
No. The church,
you see
the church has its mechanisms. So, for instance, every diocese has what's called a diocesan censor,
Yeah.
who will assess material to see that it is both doctrinally consistent with the teaching of the Church, and then will recommend that the bishop grant an imprimatur. We get in the diocesan chancery periodically somebody will send us material asking for it to be assessed, asking for it to be submitted to the censor. Sometimes it's because people have written hymn texts.
Okay.
Sometimes it's because people have written a devotional work that they want approval for, ecclesiastical approval. So at that level, it can be done at the local level.
Yeah.
And then at the official level, of course, it's down to the Congregation for the Divine Worship and the Discipline of Sacraments in Rome.
Okay.
So if something is going to be tested, particularly a lot of devotions around supposed apparitions of Our Lady.
Yep.
So you'll be familiar with the whole issue around Our Lady of Medjugorje.
Yeah.
In Croatia.
Can be contentious.
Well, yes, and
in the life of the Church.
Yes, it can. But on the other hand, when you look at the benefit that people have gained spiritually, this is always what you've got to weigh up. You've got to weigh up, I guess to use a phrase of St. Paul, you've got to weigh up the fruits of what happens when people are engaged with particular devotions. Do we see authentic spiritual growth? Can we discern that there are graces
and fruits?
Yeah, that people are gaining as a result of their engagement with these particular forms of devotion. So, yes, it can be a contested area, but the Church has its way of assessing these things. Now, I don't think, there have been certain statements about Our Lady of Medjugorje so far. I think the jury's still out.
But the Church has approved it as a place of...
Yes, it has. But in terms of the
veneration.
Yeah, in terms of the actual apparitions, that's another question.
Okay. So it seems
remember that when Our Lady first appeared to Bernadette Soubirous, the Church was very sceptical, and the local clergy were highly sceptical. And you remember that the three children of Fatima also went through a very difficult time.
Yeah.
So it's not something that happens automatically.
Yeah.
And sometimes those to whom such visions are given find themselves being subject to, a huge amount of pressure and opposition. And then later to be proved that, well, yes, that seems to be part of the testing, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely, yeah. They're being tested by fire.
Yeah.
But hearkening back to private devotions, so it seems to me that if you're somebody in the Parramatta local area and you have a devotion to Our Lady and Jesus and saving souls, and you have your own cards and prayers and you create your own things and you present it to the diocese for the censor deputatus to approve and imprimatur, and you start spreading that devotion around. Can that be used publicly? Or is that for private use on a local level at that stage? If
people want to get together to use the material, I guess they could do so. I mean, what most people tend to do is that most Catholics develop a devotion to particular saints or a particular cause, and then they construct a very positive sort of framework under which they will then enrich their spiritual lives.
Okay.
So people do that of their own volition. I think that's fair enough. I think our issue is that if they pick up material that is questionable or not in accordance with church teaching, well, then that can be problematic.
Yeah.
So that's why, if you ever walk into a church, or if I'd walked into churches where I was the parish priest and I'd walk around and see all this material left on the pews, I would collect it all up and throw it away, because more often than not, it's people wanting to push a particular agenda.
Yeah. You see I've seen all sorts of things, and you have yourself, I'm sure, of prayers asking somebody to pray a particular prayer and spread it to 7 people. Otherwise, you'll be cursed on the 7th day.
Yeah, I know.
But it sounds
that's
awful.
That is not. None of that is authentic.
Yeah.
And that's not how we operate, and we've never operated that way. I mean that to my mind is sort of that's sort of spooky, and it's and it's you'll be aware from certain cultures. There's people go on about, being cursed and all that sort of thing. It doesn't sit well with Western mindsets, not Western rational mindsets. Yeah. But I know that's a part of some cultures. But no, I would not, under any circumstances. I think that's to put that imposition on somebody is not living according to the life of the gospel at all.
Yeah, I think we just have to reiterate. Yeah,
it's coercive. And in some ways, it can also be damaging, because if a person who is subject to that degree of pressure is feeling vulnerable in some way, then it can actually end up being quite damaging. So, we just need to be careful. But look, there's so much on offer, Reading this document today in preparation for this session tonight made me just realise, revisiting it, and of course I've read it a number of times before, but there's just so much. For instance,
there's too many private devotions.
Well, there's a whole issue here, or not an issue, but a whole section here on relics.
Okay,
relics,
yeah.
on the veneration of relics.
Yes, I know my fair share of relic collectors, or people who have many collections of relics for their private devotions.
Sure. Now, I think of some years ago when Bishop Kevin Manning was the Bishop of Parramatta, we had the visit of the relics of Saint Teresa of Lisieux.
Yes, correct.
And I remember distinctly, he and I were going up to. The relics were being taken from Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Wentworthville and going off to another church, another station church. And so there was to be a mass before the relics were taken out and transported to wherever it was going.
Yeah.
And because the crowds had been so huge, like it drew huge crowds, the police had sort of blocked off streets around where the church is in Wentworthville. And so Bishop Kevin Manning and I turned up. I drove him up. I think I was Dean of the Cathedral at the time and Diocesan Master of Ceremonies.
What year was that?
Can't remember. And I parked the car and we walked down the street and we got close to the church, and I said to him, there doesn't, it's very quiet. I said, I wonder whether there'll be many people here, you see, as we walked up the front steps of the church. And the church was packed with people in silent prayer. Wow. And because there were no cars, because the police had blocked the streets for traffic control, people had parked their cars where they could and had walked to the church. But when I walked in the church with the bishop, it was completely and utterly packed out. Like it was, you couldn't move. There were that many people there for this sort of farewell mass.
Yeah.
So relics are very powerful. We have a relic of St. Anthony of Padua in the church at Toongabbie.
Yeah.
St. Anthony is very, it has a great devotion in the subcontinent. He is very popular for people from India and Sri Lanka.
Yes.
They have a mass to St Anthony frequently at St Anthony's at Toongabbie.
Yeah, the Toongabbie
I think it's on a Tuesday night, and it's always full. People come from all over to go. Now, can I touch on something that is familiar to do with the Maronites? Do you remember when they had relics of one of the great Maronite saints here?
What year was this?
Only a couple of years ago. At
the Phoenician boat.
Yes,
reliquary.
Yes.
It's a great.
That was
great
over
model.
at Bankstown, isn't it?
Punchbowl.
Punchbowl. Yeah, the church, St. Charbel.
St. Charbel's, yes.
Yeah. Well, look at the number of people who were drawn to the celebrations around that. I saw some of that online.
I saw that too online, yeah.
George, it surprised me. I thought you would have been in the front row.
I haven't been a very good Maronite most of my life.
But
they're a little bit too Latinized.
But that procession down the street, like it was extraordinary. Like there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in that procession.
Wow, yeah.
When they carried that reliquary into St. Charbel's church there, Punchbowl.
Yeah.
So
I don't think traffic control would have had contributed
to yeah. But again, so there's great power
absolutely.
Great power in public devotional activity, processions with reliquaries, processions with statues. We see it all the time. It not only gives positive witness to the faith, but it helps reinforce for people who participate in these things their sense of belonging and is a public expression of their devotion. And I think this is so important.
It's very important.
I think it's so important that we don't hide, the witness of our faith. And I think there are a number of years where, we were probably a bit timid, but now we see an emergence. Whenever people put on these sorts of processions, these sorts of activities, the numbers attending to them are extraordinarily large. I mean, you look at the Corpus Christi procession in the Archdiocese of Sydney.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was there this year.
Yeah, well, it's
20,000 people.
It's very, very big. So we've sort of come out of our hidey holes, I suppose, in some ways. I think in a immediate post-Vatican II church, I think people thought that a lot of the church's devotional activity was now not going to be so prominent, because now that the liturgy was accessible in vernacular languages, that people might drop devotions. I think what we found is that then created a sense of paucity for some people in terms of their religious and spiritual lives. And I think we've bounced back from that, and we've recaptured that the devotional life of the church in its popular and private devotions is absolutely essential for the spiritual well-being of everybody. So we've recaptured, I think, a dimension of the church that I think for about 15, 20 years we lost.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
We lost.
So we lost it for a while.
We lost it for a while, and now we've regained it. Why
do you think we lost it for a while? Is it the fact
I think the fact of when you go back and look at, for instance, why a lot of these devotions began in the Middle Ages, for instance, which was a very religious age, was because the liturgy was seen to be the preserve of the clergy and the religious, because it was in Latin, and ordinary folk didn't understand Latin. So they felt that they needed something to provide them with a sense of spiritual nourishment.
Yeah.
So the great age of the emergence of religious devotions happened in the medieval period. So from about 900 on through to 15th century,
15th century
was an enormous time of rich development. I think, for instance, of the Passion plays that were performed in the medieval world, and the great processions that took place. These village processions we were talking about earlier, they all began back in the medieval period. That's where they came from, because it gave people a sense that, well, this is ours. This is what we do. This is ours. You know, the clergy have got the liturgy, but this is ours. Now, I think
they can do some. They can
a
participatio activa, active participation.
And I think what happened was that a lot of people thought, well, once the liturgy is rendered in the vernacular, then it becomes the possession of everybody, and therefore people won't feel that they need this other addition to the development of their spiritual lives. I think that was wrong. I think they misread it. I think people actually need far more fertile field in terms of their religious imagination and their religious devotion. Sure, the liturgy's been a huge success, but on the other hand, people were deprived of the richness of these devotions. And I think why John Paul II wrote this document was to say, yes, the liturgy is paramount, but these devotions are absolutely critical for the well-being and spiritual lives of the Catholic faithful.
Wow. And what was the document again for our listeners?
So the document is entitled Directory on Popular Piety and the Liturgy, Principles and Guidelines, published by the Congregation for Divine Worship and Discipline of the Sacraments in December of 2001. It's available if you go to the Vatican website and put in Directory of Popular Piety. Then it'll come up, and you can actually download
everything that's been approved.
Yeah, you can download the document, and it's in English, French, Italian, and Spanish.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. It shows that. And how do I articulate? Private devotion is people's outward expression of their interior faith. Could we say, or it's nourishing their interior faith?
It's nourishing their interior faith, and also because we're the diversity, because we're so different, everybody will develop their own. For instance, for a lot of people, some saints have a particular attractiveness.
That's right.
That now, for instance, I know there are a lot of women, for instance, who are very, very drawn to St. Rita of Cascia.
Okay.
Now, if you know her story, I can understand why people would be attracted and have that devotion. In the same way that other people have other devotion to other saints. I mean, more generally, all Catholics have a devotion to Our Lady, and then from there, people seem to pick and choose which saints they're going to find sort of that they can identify with. And, you know, one of the things that we have this custom, as you know, in the Latin Rite, where when children are confirmed, they choose a confirmation name. And these days, they can either choose to use their baptismal name or they can choose a saint. So they've got an option.
Yeah. So mine was St. George. I was confirmed by Archbishop Fisher in 2010.
Oh. And
I'm a great Maronite.
Yes. So, and I always like to ask the kids, why did you choose Michael? Why did you choose Joseph?
That's right.
Why did you choose Agnes? Why did you choose Mary MacKillop? Why did you choose Teresa? You see, so it often becomes a good talking point when you're speaking to the candidates for confirmation to be able to say, well, why did you choose that saint's name? And some of the saints' names that people present with are very obscure when I go out to do confirmation, and I discover that particular saint is important in their own in the family's country of origin. So there are obscure saints that I've never heard of that when I question them, they say, oh, well, that was the saint of our village back in Europe in such and such a place.
Wow.
So it lives on. You see that it's passed down from generation to generation, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah. I think private devotions serve a very pastoral purpose for people, to engage them.
Yep.
Because look, obviously the Mass is the prayer of the Church.
Yeah.
It's bound by the rituals and the rubrics of the Mass, and we participate in it. As you said beautifully, all those private devotions, public and private, all lead us to the Mass.
Yeah, they do. And then they should also encourage us when we're out of the Mass to continue with those devotions. So they lead us to and they take us from.
Yep.
And I think when I had one night, you and I had a discussion here about the Liturgy of the Hours, about the Divine Office.
Exactly.
And I think I pointed to you that that evening I was here, that the lot of lay people have now taken up the recitation of the office because of the ease of particular applications that are available online. They can put it on their phone.
Yeah.
And people, I know a lot of lay men and women now who pray the office, as well as having their own private devotions. So they're just really, enriching, even more enrichment. Yeah.
So what is the public prayer of the Church? Obviously the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass.
Well, no. The Liturgy of the Hours is the public prayer of the Church.
Yeah, as well.
That's common worship.
Yeah.
And the sacraments, of which the Mass is the most important. Of course, we've got all those other sacramental celebrations like the Mass, like baptism, like confirmation, etc. So we have our sacramental celebrations. Most of them do tend to take place within the context of Mass, but not all of them.
Yeah.
Baptism obviously can be within Mass, but more often than not is outside of Mass.
Yeah.
Confirmation is normally within Mass, but it can be outside of Mass. The anointing of the sick can be in Mass, but more often than not is outside of it. Matrimony can be within Mass, or it can be out of it. Funerals can be within Mass, or they can be out of it.
That's right.
So the sacraments, the only one, of course, and the sacrament of, the only one that never takes place within Mass is the sacrament of penance. Penance, as you remember, can be celebrated communally with the second rite of reconciliation.
Yeah.
But more often than not, most people go to first rite, which is one-on-one confession.
Do we ever celebrate the second rite?
Yes, many parishes do. In Advent and Lent, it's quite common for parishes to have second rite celebrations where several priests will come. So they do.
It wouldn't require.
But it never happens in Mass.
Sins, obviously, publicly.
No, because people come up to the priest individually. So second rite is a catechetical preparation, and then they come forward to a priest in private, make their confession, and receive absolution.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I hadn't looked into it actually.
But it is quite popular, and it still happens in some.
We're very busy in Sydney life,
But
nobody has time, and not many people have time for it. Everybody wants to get in and out of the confessional.
Yeah, but a lot of people like second rite.
Yeah, it sounds great.
So what else can I tell you about? The list is...
the list goes on.
The list just goes on. So, talking about the veneration of the Blessed Mother, talks about times for Marian devotion, the importance of the Saturday memorial.
The Saturday devotions.
Then Marian months, of course, the Angelus, the Regina Coeli, the Rosary, the liturgy of the Blessed Virgin Mary, act of consecration or entrustment to the Blessed Virgin Mary, scapular of Our Lady of Mount Carmel and other scapulars.
That's an interesting
Marian
one.
medals. So again,
Medals,
you see,
scapulars.
there's so much, isn't there, really? And we could go on and on and on and on forever, delving into just what's on the menu, if you like. And what's on the menu is just enormous, you know. So people ultimately, of course, as I said, will pick and choose. They'll pick and choose.
Yeah. This is where we can be cafeteria Catholics.
Absolutely,
in a sense.
And it's fine to be in that because you couldn't do it all. Like when I look at this list here and I think to myself, there's no way that you could do all of this as it's outlined in the directory. There's no way you could do it.
Many years ago, I went up to visit Father John Rizzo in his
yes,
up in Tyburn with the Tyburn sisters, and after having coffee with him, he pulled out a big box full of all these devotions, a pile of scapulars, cards, everything. He said, pick one. So I dunked my hand and took it out, and there it was, a green scapular of St. Michael.
Right.
Yeah. So I have that still, and yeah, but there's so much, you know, and it's great when you go into piety stores, especially the one in Granville in what's it called, CMP? The Cross Media Project, CMP. Cross Media Project,
run by the Sisters of Queen of the World.
Yeah,
they've got that big
and the
shop
Newman
there.
Centre out in St Mary's.
St Mary's is another one. Yeah.
And so you get exposed to the different devotions, and the sense I get is that many people have a connection, a personal connection, particular devotions, because it speaks to them personally, sustains their faith, helps their relationship grow with our Lord, and brings them back to and connects them to the ultimate prayer of the Church, being the sacrifice of the Mass.
Yeah, absolutely. So this
not takes them away from
No, it doesn't.
Because we do have a danger there, and we might speak about that.
There's a very, this has been a wonderful inheritance that we have. That has been going on, for a couple of thousand years, this extraordinary treasury. And I think it's a case of, as you rightly said before, it's like being in the big Catholic cafeteria, and we've got to make decisions about what is going to enhance our own spirituality, what will appeal to us. Because not everything is going to appeal to everybody, because we're all different people. And some of these devotions will appeal to some people and not to others.
I do want to touch on just warning people of the dangers of becoming over obsessive with devotions.
Well,
because I do see that, in many times, somebody of Lebanese ancestry and many people in different circles of the Church who have different devotions or are over charismatic with some particular devotions. Especially in the Philippines, what I encountered is that some people have fixations on devotions, and also in the East as well, and parts of Europe. Sometimes in Spain, you find in South America fixations on devotions that in a sense, just by observation, doesn't seem healthy or is excessive. Where is the line, Father, that we can draw where it doesn't become constructive to have too many devotions and obsessions with the devotion that we forget about Mass?
Yeah, well,
forget about confession, the essentials.
That's what this document is trying to address.
Okay.
So it's trying to tell us that, yes, our public and private devotions are important, but they're not the summit of our life. The summit of our life is our participation in the Eucharistic sacrifice. And that's what it says. And all the other things aid and abet us in terms of our spiritual development. But in the end of the day, we are a sacramental people, and we need, above all else, the graces that come to us from the sacraments.
Excellent.
That's it, when it's all said and done. Now, if people have got the time to develop a rich tapestry of devotional life, well, that's lovely.
Yeah.
But most people don't have the luxury of doing that.
Yeah.
And most people will have their favourite or preferred devotion or devotions, and they will employ those. And the other thing, George, is that because through life we change as we get older.
Yeah.
And something that might have worked for us in our 20s might not work for us in our 50s.
That's right.
And so often
30s.
people will change their devotions
Yeah.
at a particular point in life because the devotion that they've maybe been very attached to doesn't speak to them in the way that it used to. So they might go looking for something else.
Yeah.
And that's fine because it's
there are means to an
changing your diet.
Yeah, exactly.
And we need variation in the diet. And that's true of our spiritual selves as
Exactly, yeah. But not to become fixated on the devotions or...
No, because the devotions are
forget the
only...
essentials.
Devotions are stepping stones
Yeah,
to help us into somewhere else.
yeah,
They're not an end in themselves.
yeah.
And if a person thinks that a devotion is an end in itself, well, then we've got a problem.
Yeah, exactly. So another thing to remind our listeners is do check every devotion, prayer card, everything, cross-check it with your local church, or if it has the approval, it will usually have a neo obstat or an imprimatur.
Yeah.
It's approved by the church.
Yeah, and if you read something and you think it's a bit dodgy, well, then you should go and talk to your parish priest and say, what do you make of this?
Yes.
What do you make of this?
And we employ the diocesan inquisition.
Well, we do. Well, we don't have an inquisition, but we do have a censor.
I could take up that job.
Yes, you probably could.
I'd probably enjoy it.
We'll leave that conversation for another time. But I think this is part of the great richness of Catholicism. And I think it's something that makes Catholicism very attractive to such a lot of people because there's something for everyone.
Yeah.
And no
really
one
is.
No one
is left
I'd
out.
be very surprised if anybody said, I can't find a devotion that suits me. I would be amazed.
The church is so broad. You think you know every spirituality group, organization, you're still learning every day and finding out different groups.
Yeah.
As much as you think you know every circle and avenue of the church, there's too many. And that's what's beautiful about the faith. But all united, the one faith, one sacrament, one sacrament under the successor of Peter, Pope Leo, and it's just that unity of faith and diversity in devotions and diversity in spiritualities.
Yeah.
As Cardinal Pell said, unity in the essentials, disunity in the non-essentials.
Yeah. Well, diversity in the non-essentials.
Diversity in the non-essentials.
But I think also what people need to be encouraged to do is to actually, if they do come from a particular ethnic background, is to delve back into saying, well, what was unique about the religious culture of perhaps where my family came from?
Okay.
What is that? What can I discover that belongs, that's part of the patronage or the patrimony that we've received, and they might get surprised if they go on searching to say, well, if they go back to look at the original village or town where their families might have come from, if they're immigrants, they might discover that there's a very rich local devotional tradition that would be worth exploring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's absolutely beautiful. And let's end with 3 practical tools. How can people start today taking up the call to engage, with a particular private devotions?
All right. Well, let's
life?
start with the first one. Then the first one is that
Are you listening, John?
My assumption is that if people are just simply going to Mass and maybe going to the Sacrament of Penance, but they've not developed any devotions, the obvious beginning place is to develop the devotion, pick a devotion that centres on the Mother of God. So whether that be the Rosary or whether that be some form of devotion, the Litany of Loretto or whatever, that obviously needs to be part and parcel of the ordinary Catholic's devotional life. Now, most people, myself included, like the Rosary, derive huge spiritual benefit from praying the Rosary. It's tried and tested. It's been around for centuries. It serves people very well. So obviously I'm going to be a Rosary promoter because of that. But there might also be another saint whom you feel that you want to, or you can identify with, either because of heritage from maybe where your family might have come from, if your family's an immigrant family from overseas, or alternatively simply because you like the story of that saint, that resonates with you, it makes sense to you, and it's a person that you can identify with. A lot of people who struggle with maintaining a strong Christian witness when they're feeling besieged in that witness. Often people might look to a saint like St. Thomas More.
Yep, exactly.
Might be a saint that you'd say, well, I could identify with him. And there'll be others. So I think you need to develop a devotion to Our Lady. I think you need to also look at what other devotions speak to you. Maybe you've got to try and test them out and see whether
or a patron saint of a job.
Whether they work for you.
Yeah.
And I think the third thing is to constantly be reviewing what you're doing so that you don't get into a rut. Because it's very easy to get into a rut.
Yeah.
And then it all becomes formulaic, and then it loses its punch. Yeah. You need to be able to say, okay, well, for the next 6 months, I'm going to be engaged in this particular devotion, and at the end of 6 months, I'll review that, and you might move on to something else.
That's beautifully said.
So does that? Yeah.
I think there's a lot there, and I will be looking into the directory myself.
Yeah. Well, you should.
I've never had a look at it as well.
It's worth reading, and it's. Don't think it's all that. Just let me go through and see how long it is.
But for those listening again to access it, it's the directory of.
Yeah, of popular piety.
Popular piety.
Yeah.
On the Vatican website.
On the Vatican website, it goes on for. Yeah, it would be about 30 pages.
You're scrolling a lot, Father. There's
a lot. There's a lot here. So, how many paragraphs? Oh yes, I am scrolling, and it just keeps going. So it's a big document. No, it's a really big document. So it'll be good food for thought for those who want to have a look at it.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of paragraphs in it.
So take up a devotion. I think it's time for us to start searching.
Yeah.
And finding, something that speaks to us to help and aid our faith personally there. But thank you very much, Father, for being with me.
Pleasure, George. Great to be here.
We've had a very insightful discussion, and I'm personally inspired to read a little bit more and find something, because I find that I like to be simplistic, but simplistic in my spirituality, centering around the Mass, but it's great to venture out and add.
It's a great treasure, and I know most Catholics are aware that we've got this treasure, and most people do explore it to some degree, but if people aren't used to this or have never thought about developing a rich spiritual life in terms of both popular and private and public devotions, they should do so.
Absolutely.
Because it'll all be the better for it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for tuning in to the show. Thank you very much. And don't forget to subscribe to the Catholic Toolbox, thecatholictoolboxshow.com, and follow us on the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and also follow us on our social media. And thank you very much for tuning into the show. I'm your host and founder, George Manasseh. Until next week, God bless. Take care and take action.
In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity.